Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's the 1st of January 2022 today, and I thought now is as good time as any is to do an update on my kind of experiences with the Ricoh GRD digital camera here. I picked this up back in September 21. I did this video back in October now, where I just kind of talked about why I bought this camera and also put some kind of sample images as well, showing you what I've managed to capture with that camera up to that kind of point in time. Yeah, so it's been a few months now since I did that video, and I feel like I've had enough time now to get to know the camera. I know what it's kind of good at, what it's not so good at, and I thought I'd kind of share that in this video with you today, as well as showing you some more images that I've kind of captured with this camera since I last talked to you back in October. So this was the first Ricoh GR Digital, released back in 2006 now, and it's got an 8.1 meg CCD sensor, quite a small sensor, only a little bit bigger than probably what's in modern mobile phones, and it's got a maximum aperture of f2.4, and I had a quick check and it goes up to about f9 as well. The little dial on the top here in aperture priority mode changes the aperture. So this original camera was kind of renowned for its kind of special characteristics associated with black and white photography. It's supposed to have a real kind of gritty, filmic kind of look to the images that it produces, and in particular the grain or the digital noise that it produces is supposed to resemble kind of film-like grain. And when I originally started looking at getting kind of a camera like this, I was originally looking at its third and fourth iteration in this kind of early Ricoh GR Digital line. But the reason I discounted those cameras is because apparently Ricoh applied kind of more heavy kind of noise reduction to the kind of the noise in these cameras, so it kind of removed the kind of the character that this camera kind of conjures up when it's kind of capturing its black and white kind of images, and I'll show you some examples of that later on. That's kind of my understanding of why the original one still kind of garners a bit of a kind of a cult status these days. Although it's not too cold, because I managed to pick this camera up now for about £110, which is probably the cheapest I've spent on a camera for quite a while. So it was quite nice to be able to find one in reasonably good condition. Yeah, so I needn't worry. The quality that this camera kind of can extract from the scene using its small sensor is nothing short of amazing. As long as you don't go in expecting that it's going to produce a super clean kind of modern digital look to your compositions, and you accept that it's kind of going to give you a more gritty, a more kind of film-like look to your images, which is exactly what I was kind of looking for, and hence why I settled on the Ricoh GR Digital. Yeah, so I was also a little bit worried about its slow autofocus, but after using the original Fuji X100 and then obviously using my film cameras where there is no autofocus, it really isn't that bad when you're using spot autofocus. But the good thing with these Ricohs is they also have functions called snap autofocus, which allows it to kind of snap focus extremely fast. So really you don't have to worry about autofocusing. You change it to snap, which you can either snap it to kind of close or infinity, depending on what kind of subjects you want to capture, and just let the camera do the rest. And I really haven't had any issues with those two kind of modes. Yeah, so also with the Ricoh as well, its lens is an equivalent of a 28mm on a full frame camera, so that gives you quite a wide field of view. So what I was going to do now briefly is I was going to just put up some images that I've captured with the Ricoh since the last video, and then when that montage is finished I'll go into a bit more depth on the kind of the pros and the negatives of this camera. Right, so I hope you enjoyed those images. I'll sit back a bit actually. I was getting like kind of closer and closer, so I'll try and relax a little bit now for this part of the video. Let's get the negative stuff out of the way first. Right, the biggest issue I find with this camera is that it can be extremely hard to kind of meter a scene kind of correctly. It's probably the thing I struggle with most with this camera in terms of exposing bright scenes kind of correctly whilst retaining some kind of detail in the sky. And I'll put up some examples now where I just haven't been able to do this, even though when I was taking the images there was some detail in the sky. It just kind of lacks the ability to kind of capture that dynamic range in a scene compared to probably more modern digital cameras. Right, the second issue is dust on the sensor, and this doesn't seem to be limited to my particular camera. It seems to be an issue with all Ricoh GR cameras, in that invariably you will get dust on the sensor, even though it is a kind of a fixed lens system. It's not weather sealed, which probably goes to some way in that the dust does find its way onto the sensor. Generally, it doesn't really show up in the images, I find, only really kind of if you pixel peep a lot, and they are on the whole quite easy to get rid of in post in Lightroom, for instance, with the kind of the clone spot heal remove tool, but it does take a little bit of time. And just to highlight the point, I'll put up this example now of an image that I took in Corfe Castle a few months ago. It's for a video that I haven't yet published on my channel, and you can quite clearly see, if I zoom in, you can see the dead pixels, and then also there's some areas which just don't look right. So to me, that might have been something on the lens at the time that I shot the image, or whether it's actually on the sensor itself. Right, so as you might have noticed already, and I'll talk about the size and weight of the camera in a minute, but it hasn't got an EVF or an OVF even. It's just got a kind of an LCD screen at the back for kind of framing your images. And I did think this was going to be a bit of a problem, but as it's so difficult to use in kind of bright light anyway, I haven't really found the EVF that much of a burden to use, because I just basically use it for framing a scene anyway, so it's not a problem. And if you really need a viewfinder, there's a hot shoe on the top of the camera where you can kind of fit a optical viewfinder, and Ricoh I believe do offer a couple kind of options if you do want to put a viewfinder on the camera, but I haven't really found it a big issue. And the other advantage of not having an EVF is obviously as soon as you put something on there, it'll be a bit more bulky to kind of carry with you. The final kind of negative of this camera is that I do find the live view a little bit unreliable, in that if I listen to the live view, I probably wouldn't take that many images. Sometimes you just kind of snap away and then look at the image preview to see or to get a sense of whether you've kind of exposed the scene, or whether the camera has exposed the scene correctly, and then that allows me then to kind of dial in any kind of adjustments and retake the image to try and get the kind of the scene metered and composed the way I want it. So yeah, so try not to use the live view too much. It's just, I find really good. It's really good for framing your composition, but sometimes I look on the back, I don't think it's going to be a great image, and then I've got it back to the computer and I thought, wow, I'm so glad I took it and kind of ignored the live view. Right, so that takes care of the negatives. Let's have a canter through what I absolutely love about this camera and its pros. Number one, the black and white mode of this camera is just something else. It just produces great images straight out of the camera, especially if you push the ISO to 400, 800 and the light's starting to fail a little bit. It does really produce some great kind of images with a real kind of gritty character to the images. Even though I have taken some images at ISO 1600, which gets you out of a pinch, especially when the light really starts to fail, and I put up some examples now, I do tend to find the grain or the digital noise does start to look a little bit too big and a little bit too ugly. So I do try to keep it down to a maximum of ISO 800. Just that's I feel is the kind of the sweet spot in terms of good kind of gritty images without kind of overly large or unsightly kind of digital noise, which some would argue look kind of almost film-like in their kind of appearance. And it's certainly something I'm going to be exploring in a future video with one of my film cameras, just to kind of do a side-by-side kind of comparison to see how much the kind of the digital noise from this camera resembles actual film grain. Right, so the other big positive is the size and the weight of this camera. As you can see, it's absolutely tiny. I can easily use it one-handed. You can like turn it on one-handed. You can adjust the aperture one-handed. There's a dial on the back of the camera which allows you, once you press it, to just easily cycle through your kind of your autofocus mode, your metering mode, what ISO you've got it on, and you can select auto ISO as well if you want to make things a little bit easier for yourself, and also whether you want to shoot color or black and white, and then adjust any of those kind of black and white settings. So I just find it such a joy to use. It's just so fun, you know, and like I said, it's so pocketable. It'll fit in virtually any pocket you have, and then you can just take it out one-handed, turn it on, and you're ready to go. And the weight of it is hardly anything. It's like 200 grams with a lens and its battery, so it just doesn't feel like it weighs anything in the hand. And even though it's quite small, this kind of front kind of grip on the camera I just find really kind of grippy, and it just allows you to kind of keep it really solid in your hand when you're using it. The only negative is that you want to take this everywhere, but because it's not weather sealed or protected, I'd probably be a bit reluctant in using it when it's kind of raining. But all other times it's just so easy just to kind of put in any kind of pocket, especially if you're kind of traveling light, but you still want a kind of camera to capture some scenes as they kind of present themselves. I absolutely love the snap focus modes on this camera. I pretty much just leave it in close kind of snap mode all the time and just snap away, and I've never really had any issues. But like I said, you can just change the snap mode to close or infinity and just capture away. Really, it's just a revelation to me, not having to kind of pick out a particular subject, and that makes it absolutely ideal for kind of street photography, where you don't want to kind of mess around with the time needed to kind of compose a scene kind of correctly. You can kind of just take it out, turn it on, and snap away. All the settings that you dialed in the previous kind of time are all retained, and just frame and take the picture. Right, so another positive, and it's one of the reasons why I really liked the original Fuji X100 as well, in that the Ricoh has also got a leaf shutter. So this makes it an extremely kind of discreet street photography kind of tool. Like I was out last night in my hometown at Sherborne shooting some kind of New Year's Eve kind of crossover lighting kind of photos, and when I was kind of taking with the Ricoh, nobody kind of bats an eyelid. But the Fuji that I was using yesterday hasn't got the loudest shutter sound, but in comparison to kind of the Ricoh, it's really quite loud. And I could do a little bit of a comparison now if you want on video. So let's just snap away with the Ricoh. Right, so let's go. So that's the Ricoh. And this is the X Pro 1. So that's quite a difference. Another good thing with the Ricoh as well is that the images which come out of camera, when you kind of nail the exposure and the composition, just look great. You know, you don't really need to edit them, but there is still some latitude in the kind of the small 3 meg JPEGs if you do want to kind of do some kind of minor editing. And it's also got a raw mode as well, which takes a larger kind of raw file, which you have to bear in mind though that the camera, because it's so old, it takes about 13 seconds on average to kind of write the raw file to your kind of card, which is good if you've kind of got a different style and you don't want to use the kind of the Ricoh's kind of JPEG processing engine. But that engine is certainly one of the big draws of this camera for me, in that it kind of produces, or can produce, some really kind of gritty black and white images. It's quite liberating not to have to edit these too much. Generally, if the exposure works out well, it's just a case of just kind of cropping, leveling to how I kind of want the final image to look like. Yeah, so hopefully from that little run through, you can see that I think the pros certainly outweigh the negatives, and I've taken some really nice images with this camera. It's so fun to use, and like I said, it just slips into any pocket. So if I don't want to take my bigger cameras out with me and I just want to use the Ricoh, then I can just take it and kind of almost forget that it's there sometimes. But no, it's certainly a very fun and easy camera to use, which can produce some truly outstanding images which just ooze kind of character, especially black and white kind of film-like kind of images. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any kind of questions on the Ricoh GRD that you want me to kind of answer, or functions that you want me to explore, then feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'll finish this video with some of my favourite images that I've captured with the Ricoh GRD. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.